Welcome to the Common Good Podcast, a conversation about the significance of place, eliminating economic isolation, and the structure of belonging. My name is Joey Taylor, and I'm the producer of the podcast. For this week's episode, Chris LaRue, the director of the Hive, speaks with Kristen Barker. In addition to being a fellow at the Hive, Kristen is a social entrepreneur and the president and co-founder of Co-op Sensi, and is a co-founder of One Worker, One Vote. She designs and leads participatory education events with English and Spanish-speaking co-op workers, and helps worker owners make their businesses more successful. Kristen also helps determine the feasibility of potential co-op businesses, helps retiring business owners determine whether they can sell their business to their employees, and helps viable co-ops access the capital they need to leverage their ideas. We start the conversation with Chris reflecting on why it was important for him to have this conversation.
Kristen, I'm really excited for this conversation because as we're getting to know each other, you represent to me someone who's creating an alternative world, someone who's being creative and isn't waiting for institutions to create the world that we need, but is really, you're taking it upon yourself and trusting the relationships around you and the potential in the folks around you to create a different world through worker ownership, which is something I'm still learning a lot about. In my life, I've been noticing a lot of reactive energy and almost being enthralled with what's unfolding in the current administration, and the end product being me feeling maybe helpless and discouraged. And in our work at the Hive and the people that we're in community with at the Hive, and you being a Hive fellow, for example, there's something about the creative potential in these relationships and that they encourage me that we're actually the ones we've been waiting for, right? Like we could create the world that we need. And there's power in naming that. And there's power in not waiting on that. So it's important for me to be here because to talk about that and to talk with a fellow creative and change maker and to learn from your work and explore our intersections. So.
Well, I truly appreciated the invitation to be on this podcast, in part because I think we're living through a very challenging time. And I think what you're talking about, signs of societal breakdown, institutional breakdown are all around, and some horrific genocide. And it's a tough time. There's so much going on. And at the same time, I think it is really critical that we not only resist challenging and unjust structures, that we also build. And we pay attention to what can break through. So at times of breakdown, sometimes that's when we become a little bit less comfortable, and larger numbers of us become ready and open to new ways of looking at things, seeing things, new ways of building things. They may not be new. They may be like a blast from the past and cooperatively connecting and mutually connecting, which has been a part of our storyline from the beginning, but more open to ways of coming together that are, distinct from a capitalist extractive system. Newness becomes available. And so I'm really interested in opportunities where we can notice those things together, water those seeds, and say, what is it that we want to break through? What can we, as you say, come together to build? And at Co-op Sensi, one of the things that is really inspiring to me, or that I frequently reflect on, is that in rough times of potential fascism, we have an example. We have an example from the Basque region of Spain that Co-op Sensi is based on, where this whole network came into being at a time when the Spanish Civil War had occurred and Franco went to power. Many in the Basque region had fought against him. However, no area is monolithic. So the level of polarization was really extreme in the Basque region. The level of income inequality was really extreme. And into this situation, into this town called Mondragon, this Catholic priest, who was the first one said it was too dangerous because people were being murdered over their ideologies. There was too much poverty, too much desperation. But the second priest, Arizmendi Arrieta, Father Arizmendi Arrieta, which we can say Arizmendi from here on out, but he actually got people connected. And I think this is the thing, we may throw up our hands when we feel authoritarianism is upon us, when we feel there will always be poor, there will always be income inequality, but we have this example, and I'll tell you a little bit more about it. But from the Basque region of Spain, that ended up taking an area that had some of the highest levels of income inequality, and 50 years later had the lowest level in all of Spain of income inequality, lowest level of poverty, all of Spain, some of the lowest levels of inequality anywhere in the world. And it came through this integrated network of worker ownership. And it came at a time of incredible challenge. And in part because Father Arizmendi said, ideologies, ideas like fascism, authoritarianism, right, left, these things, they pull us apart, they push us apart, but needs bring us together. So people that see the world in radically different ways can actually come together around a common need, like housing, like dignified work, like community, like education. You can come together. And so he started building trust through soccer games, but he also had all these community conversations about what was going on. And he would close the windows because he didn't want people passively listening. He kept the doors open. He wanted people to walk all the way in and engage and participate and say, all right, how do we come together? And he got people working together across difference and started a school. 15 years later, the first graduates started the first cooperative. And now there's over 100 just in the Mondragon system with over 70,000 people employed. It's so inspiring how this whole region changed. And that's what we want to see here. And it's possible, even now, especially now.
Yeah, talk about the vision for co-op, Cincy, because you've shared some bold goals and visions. I think 100-year visions, right?
Well, 50 years.
50 years, okay.
Yeah. So our vision, at this moment is, while the Basque region of Spain is a very different cultural context than us. In fact, they are generally more collective thinking. So whereas we talk about in the United States generally the American dream and a family thriving with that white picket fence, instead of a family, it's more of like a community-minded space in the Basque region. So that really helps with the cooperatives coming into being. And cooperatives are just, I know you know this, but if other people are listening, they are businesses that are owned and controlled by their members. In this case, we're talking about the members being workers, but there's sometimes worker and communities or consumers can be members. They are also producers. There's different kinds of cooperatives, but what we're talking about in Mondragon principally are these worker-owned cooperatives. And here in the United States, we do have to open it up more. We do have to go back to thinking more collectively around communities thriving for this to really take off in the same kind of way. But the good news for us is we have lots of examples here in the United States. So we have unions that have often thought largely collectively about the common good. We have a whole lot of spiritual traditions that have So we have pockets all over the place. We have communities like the Hive that care a lot about creating the common good and really thinking about the common good. And so that is really important here. So we have a different cultural context. So that's a challenge. However, the population of the Basque region is 2.1 million. The population of Greater Cincinnati is 2.2 million. So our goal in 50 years, which is when we started this goal, was 2022. So by 2072 is to have 80,000 people here in worker ownership. And right now, at this moment, because we're counting both worker-owned cooperatives and 100% employee stock ownership plans, we have over 5,000. So it's actually a 6% increase each year. So it's actually quite doable. It requires a lot of connecting and building awareness, but it is doable.
That's really beautiful. And I wonder how many times you've perhaps seen someone cross the threshold when they didn't realize that they could do something like this. And so talk about that. Do you have stories to share where there's someone who's starting a business that is maybe following a template that's been laid out for them by just mainstream dominant culture, capitalism, like that basic economic template, right? There's something about someone waking up to alternative possibility and then the courage to actually follow through and do something, like follow the path less traveled, but a path that represents something that's for the common good rather than just individual hierarchical profit.
Right, like shared risk and shared reward. I mean, I think that's part of what inspires folks. Actually, our very first co-op, which we started in 2012, is called Our Harvest Cooperative. So it's a food hub and it's a farm. And that's actually one of the hardest things you can do because there's just very little margin when it comes to growing food. And it's a really tricky one. But what has been super powerful, and I just want to answer your question to start with this way, because Stephen Danger, he started there as a farm apprentice, but he had started originally as doing his own farm enterprise. He had a small piece of land and a small area. He was spending so much of his life energy. He was working like, I don't know, 70, 80-hour weeks and so forth, trying to make that work. But he ended up coming and gathering with others with this Our Harvest Cooperative. He began as a farm apprentice. He's now the farm manager and has been for years. And he said what he loves so much is that it's not all on his shoulders. It's that shared risk and reward. He doesn't have those kinds of weeks, like where he was putting it in. He's like, the work is divided among the team. So we want those wages in farming to be higher, and that is a major challenge and something we're always working towards. But he highlights what is it like to be part of something that has so much worker voice and has such, you share in the responsibilities and the rewards, and there's such a team. And so life becomes a much more beautiful thing to be a part of. And what I would say is, I guess I have a lot of examples of people learning about this, shifting, because at Co-op Cincy, we have a variety of strategies to get to that 80,000 worker owners. One is like I think partly what you're talking about, which is just groups of people coming together to start their own business as a cooperative. So we have a startup aspect of what we do, and we have a 14-week kind of startup boot camp related to that. And then we have this thing called our conversions or transitions program, which is existing companies that want to sell to their workers. We have that as another way that you come in. And then our third strategy is working with those groups, because we're creating, as Mondragon did, this integrated network. So not only are you sharing risk and reward together in your company, you're also part of a community of companies, community of cooperatives, where each of those cooperatives share back profits to this cooperative of cooperatives, which enables all of them to be stronger together. So it has allowed in Mondragon all of these companies to go through down cycles, and, because everyone has those. And so it has been creating rainy day funds. It's created money for research that they could pull together. It's created different economies of scale. So that is what we are bringing to life. Mondragon, I think I didn't mention this, but Mondragon International made a partnership with the United Steelworkers in 2009 to bring this to life, and Co-op Cincy came to life as a result. A dear friend active in the labor movement, Phil Amadon, saw this in the New York Times and brought it to a group of 4 of us, a union organizer, Ellen Vera, an immigrant rights worker, well, now they're husband and wife, Flecker Vera, and then myself at a place at the time called Intercommunity Justice and Peace Center. And anyhow, so it came to life as a result of that, and we made a direct connection with Mondragon in that process.
We asked Kristen to share a poem or a poetic thought that inspires her and guides her work. She chose these words from Howard Thurman. I invite you to take a breath and let these words settle into your body. All around us, worlds are dying and new worlds are being born. All around us, life is dying and life is being born. The fruit ripens on the tree. The roots are silently at work in the darkness of the earth against a time when there shall be new lives, fresh blossoms, green fruit. Such is the growing edge. It is the extra breath from the exhausted lung, the one more thing to try when all else has failed. The upward reach of life when weariness closes in upon all endeavor. This is the basis of hope in moments of despair, the incentive to carry on when times are out of joint and men have lost their reason, the source of confidence when worlds crash and dreams whiten into ash. The birth of a child, life's most dramatic answer to death. This is the growing edge incarnate. Look well to the growing edge. As we return, the conversation shifts to Howard Thurman.
I think I want to turn toward a figure that I want to invite Howard Thurman into the conversation, an ancestor that we both admire so much. Howard Thurman was considered the mystic of the civil rights movement, an elder during the movement, mentor of Dr. King. Born in 1899 in Daytona Beach, Florida, in the Jim Crow South, and from a very early age, had a very keen sense of spirituality. It kind of sets him on a path where he becomes a priest and a preacher eventually, but becomes this voice in the movement calling people toward their inner life, with folks who want to create an alternative world. And he saw the necessity to turn toward the inner life, and he saw the cost of not turning toward it. He told this graduating class, he invited them to listen for the sound of the genuine. Mm-hmm. And he said, almost hauntingly, he said, if you don't listen for the sound of the genuine, if you never find that place in you, the mark of your own inner authority, if you never find it, you'll forever be living at the ends of puppet strings that someone else is controlling. And so when it comes to folks that are seeking to create an alternative world, going almost against the grain of the dominant culture, right? Creating an alternative economy, alternative community, I think it's a lot harder to do that. I think the people that we've seen do it best, the heroes of the civil rights movement and these different labor movements, I think a common thread in almost all of their lives is some sense of interiority, some way that they were resourcing themselves for the work.
Totally agree.
And that intersects with the Hive's work, because we're helping folks identify what are those practices that help them develop their interiority, their capacity to hold themselves in presence. Right. And then how that affects, now that you could hold yourself, whether it's learning how to meditate or taking a dive into some healing work and trauma healing and things like that. Maybe it's creative practice that helps you cultivate some of that interior creativity. That comes to bear in relationship. Now that I can hold myself, how can I hold you? And I think that one of the huge risks that I'm hearing in worker ownership is the risk of community. Like, why would I trust someone else with the finances? Right? I'm just narrating kind of stories that the dominant culture might tell, right? Why would I share profit with you when I could have more for myself? Like, I would rather you be a hired hand than you have the shared risk and reward in this company. I'm not willing to let you in that close. These are all stories that I think our culture tells, but also stories that our economy as it is reinforces.
So first of all, we're living inside this, we're swimming inside the culture we live in, right? There's so many different strands that we're swimming in. And one of them is this really common thought that there's a manager and there's a worker, and managers or owners, like they think about these things and workers think about these things. And what's tricky is even when you create a structure where all workers have a chance to become owners, an ownership mindset, an ownership and worker mindset held together isn't a given, because so basically people stepping fully at any given moment, people stepping fully into their agency isn't given, even in any moment, maybe in a conversation, even outside of work. But say in the context of worker ownership, just because you have a structure like a cooperative doesn't mean that just like flips a switch. So what is required, and in part when I was talking a little bit about the differences culturally between the Basque region and here, is some conversations around solidarity, for example, conversations around the cooperative principles in a way where people are really kind of meditating, thinking about them, contemplating, not meditating, but contemplating them. And then like thinking about how are they showing up for themselves? How are they showing up in the co-op? How do we want them to show up? Having these sorts of conversations, like where people are really checking in. So these are practices we have in our various meetings. We have other meeting practices that start to build, because really, in order for co-ops to work, people have to step into their agency, into their self-leadership. We have to constantly be building trust. We have to, these are things that are just part and parcel of the experience. And so we need to be intentional and clear about that and create ways to just put our intention there. So one of the practices of every team meeting is 2 positives and 1 concern. And this is where, and I just so you have a sense, like our co-ops are really diverse. The members of our co-ops are really diverse. So we can have people there that haven't had formal education beyond 3rd grade, say because they're refugees, to maybe a person there that has a master's degree. So that's a lot. Like there's just lots of different dynamics. So there may be male-female dynamics, black, white, brown, dynamics, like education, formal education dynamics. How do we create a space where everyone's gifts are recognized and where everyone feels like they can show up and step more fully into their gifts? Because as everyone does, the community gets so much stronger, the co-op, the business, all these things thrive. And so we're looking for ways. And a super simple thing is this 2 positives and 1 concern. Because what is cool about that is the expectation is everyone participates. Everyone can say something positive. There's no rules around the positives. It can be, I'm alive. I mean, it can be how beautiful the day is. It can be something about work. It can be anything. And then the concern can be anything. And so those are things that we can all do. And so we set the expectation. And it also humanizes us, because that's the thing. Like we have to have practices that remind us, because we can so easily objectify. We can, and we do. We objectify day after, all throughout the day, where it's like we're all of a sudden, instead of seeing a person as a person, they are in our way from getting something accomplished, and they're no longer a full person. And but that has hopes and dreams and fears, or they are a conduit to us getting what we need versus who they are in their fullness. And so this is something that reminds us, like in the pressures of work, where you may have thought something that we're like, ooh, the fullness of someone. Whoa, that person has this going on. Like, oh my goodness. But it's also a small thing about self-awareness, even like, what can I think of that's positive? What is going on with me? Like, it's these things that are needed to build self-leadership. And it's fascinating to me that the simple practice that everyone can do then sets we want everyone's contribution in here, like it sets the stage for everyone to contribute as we talk about meaty things or things that need to be challenged. But we are looking at trust, for example, as a way in, like, what does trust mean? And we kind of divide it into 4 parts based on the work of someone's name I'm forgetting right now, Charles. I can tell you what the 4 parts are, but I can't think of his name. Thin Book of Trust is what you would want to look up. Charles Feltman. Thanks for that assist. But we divide it into those 4 parts, and then we talk about like how that's showing up and how that's not showing up, and what are our practices within our co-op that build trust or that destroy trust, and what can we do to repair. And so I guess what I want to say is you are so right to highlight the importance of interior work. We spend time on saying, what is it that supports you to be fully you? Like, what is it to help you, like, come back alive fully, like when you're overwhelmed, or what is it that you need to do? So some people have led us in breath work. Some people at different co-ops, they also vary a lot. Some of the co-ops are really into yoga or things like that. Some of them find that a little, in breath work and stuff, a little dicey, but they will close their eyes for a little bit and go through a visualization or things like that. But even doing things like writing what they want for, like, a letter to themselves in a year. I mean, we're doing stuff like this all the time to work on supporting each of us to step more fully into our potential, which I see the Hive as this incredible opportunity. We all need healing. We all need strategies to handle these challenges and come back to ourselves. And that's unbelievably necessary in the work of building a co-op, because nothing's really super easy when it comes to like navigating a business. There's ups and downs, and we need strategies for wholeness and staying in it. And and building together.
For wholeness, for staying in it, and for building together.
Mhm.
That's it. Yeah. There's a lineage of embodiment that the Strozzi Institute facilitates and teaches around. And some friends and facilitators of the Hive have trained in this modality. It's based in Japanese martial art of Aikido. It's just as much as a spiritual tradition as it is a martial art. But one of the things I'm compelled by is in this embodiment tradition, as you're learning these embodiment practices, to be more present. This practice is all about, can I stay home? Can I stay grounded when I'm under pressure? It's similar to what Thurman's getting at with engaged contemplation. We're not doing this to just withdraw and live in a hermitage for the rest of our life, right? Like there's something about interiority that enables a type of resilience where I could stay at home in myself, and let's say it's a work conflict, and not forget that what's in me is in you and what's in you is in me. Like we don't sever our tie to the beloved community, as Dr. King might say, right? So there's something about how cultivating that kind of practice, cultivating embodiment practices that help us stay at home when we're under pressure, as well as continuing to cultivate our imagination and creativity that help us remember the beloved community, the world we want, right? The world that is possible, the world that is already here. And I really do, I see you and I see our friends and the folks that we're in community with as co-conspirators in that kind of work. And that we're practicing the practices that we need to create that kind of world, right?
Mhm.
I'd like to turn our attention here, especially to folks who are local, to an invitation to Co-op Fest coming up here in June. Kristen, you want to share a little bit more about that, and then we could explore the kind of the intersection between that and what's going on at the Hive and other invitations we can make.
Yeah, that's a really fun event. It's at the Bar Farm on June 7th. It's from 3 to 6 p.m. The Bar Farm is this remarkable space we have in our area. It's a 32-acre farm within the city limits of Cincinnati. So this is incredible. It's sacred land. The soil is full of organic content, and it's just a really, really special place. And at that place, 15 of our co-ops are going to have tables that you can visit. There will be farm tours happening every 15 minutes. There's going to be delicious food prepared by Our Harvest, which is our farm team. And we're going to have yummy popsicles there. And then we will have a little program and also a no talent show from 5 to 6. That'll be a lot of fun. So people with talent and then no talent, like there's no pressure. And it'll be a total fun family time. Oh, there's a bouncy house. It's going to be cool. Then we're going to have some tables that have some of our community partners present. One of which is the Hive, Ignite Peace, working in neighborhoods. A variety of aligned groups will be there to share about what they do too, that we feel is really connected to what we do.
You had me at Bouncy House.
Right? Exciting. Cornhole, I didn't even mention that.
Oh, come on.
It's going to be a blast.
I'm so excited that you invited us to table at that, and I'm so excited for it. And especially just to make the invitation to folks who are doing really courageous work in creating an alternative future by the worker ownership and entering into those kinds of agreements of trust and reciprocity and mutuality. Like, I would love for the Hive to be a resource to those folks and vice versa. And to be in a community where it's normal to pause, where it's normal to take a breath, right? I like talking about the Hive. There are practices that have become relationally normative for me that I almost forget are not normative out in the world. Sitting in a circle at the Hive in a class and someone will say something powerful or something evocative, right? Or reveal something that they're going through. And then a facilitator to just invite the room to, did you notice what just happened in the room? Just take a breath and pause with that. And then the silence. And so it's practices like that of being able to metabolize what's arising in a room, what's arising within my life, that have just set me on a path in life that I'm proud of. And I'm seeing what's possible in relationships, the kind of words of blessing I now feel the courage and safety to share with someone. Like, this was a gift to me. Thank you for saying that. These practices don't just have to do with the inner life. I'm being struck more and more of how they create new possibility in relationship, and how that could be true of a friendship, and then what becomes possible economically when we follow through on that. And maybe it's too big of a statement, but I kind of feel like that kind of imagination of beloved community, what that looks like economically, is a co-op.
That's actually how I always describe that's been the way I've seen my life since I was younger, how building the beloved community. So that's how I view this co-op work, as helping bring that to life. And yeah, absolutely, 100%. Yeah, so I'm super excited the Hive is there. I feel like, as we were highlighting before, if we really want our greater Cincinnati area to be a thriving place, a thriving community where people have access to dignified jobs, where people are participating and stepping into their power in their neighborhoods and creating those connections and having access to education and affordable housing and having time to enjoy and play and have fun. So that's happening in pieces, right? Like, how do we help that be a flourishing of our whole area? Well, it involves lots of different pieces, right? So cooperatives can be a part of that. Land trust can be a part of that. The practices that the Hive is sharing and building community are really essential to that type of future, because how do we interact? How do we step in? How do we feel at home in ourselves? All of us have dealt with tough things in our life. How do we process those? How do we recognize, maybe in Howard Thurman's eyes, how we're all children of God, right? That we have this unbelievable inherent worth because that's who we are. So whatever people's spirituality is, maybe it's like that we're children of the universe or something, but we inherently matter, just our existence. And in order to have this world we want, this inner growth, this stepping more fully into who we are in our deepest self, which in order to step into fully who we are, we need to be in relationship with others. So this building of community is really, really part and parcel of the whole thing. So I'm really happy that the Hive is there. And it's just an incredible resource that our community has, that I want our co-op network to know all about. So it's going to be a great day on the 7th.
I love it. And I think this is it's an invitation to community, to togetherness, and really to alternative story. You talked about the diversity that happens in co-ops, economic, racial, educational.
Right.
And the way that that's inviting us into togetherness. Howard Thurman saw segregation as a poison to everybody.
Agreed.
Right? The way that it's separated, and the way that segregation is perhaps just as much alive as it was then. Like, we still have so much work to do in healing that. And so that's where I see the Hive and Co-op Cincy humbly on that path of creating an alternative future where togetherness, interdependence, and mutuality are thriving. So absolutely. I'm glad to be friends with you, Kristen. I am looking forward to everything we continue to make together and the people that we'll meet along the way. So
yeah, likewise. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. Check the show notes for more information about Chris, the Hive, Kristen, Co-op Cincy, and Co-op Fest on June 7th. This episode was produced by me, Joey Taylor, and the music is from Jeff Gorman.